On the Easter service, do note that it is going to be one service altogether again. We did it for, when did we do that? Christmas? So it's all kids will be here. It'll be at 11 o'clock. So set your clocks ahead 1 hour or whatever, So make sure to be there. We will have baptism. If you're interested in getting baptized, you've never been baptized, we'll fully immerse adults out in the back. And then if you have a baby, we'd like to have baby dedication as well. And we won't immerse the babies, though. But they'll just be that. Today I get to talk about this really famous passage in Hebrews 11 that's known as like the Hall of Faith. It's like Hall of Justice, It's like these superheroes of faith. So the Bible's going to list all these people and like how faithful, like crazy stuff happened in their life and that kind of stuff. And so I was trying to think of like, man, am I like a person of faith? Like, what do I have to say like where like I really followed God faithfully? And I was trying to think back about my life. And I was thinking about 16 years ago when I first heard God's call in my life to quit the church that I was at. I was at Bethel Korean Church in Irvine. I was a junior high pastor. I was making $1,800 a month to do part-time work. So I just worked on Fridays and Sundays and getting $1,800. That's more than I've ever made since then at any church I've been at. So that was the highlight of my financial career pastoring. But I was at Bethel thinking that I would continue there. I was the junior high pastor. But God called me to quit Bethel Church and to somehow reach kids who that nobody wanted, but God wanted, without even knowing where I would go. And so in December of 1997, I went to Pastor Sohn's office with my resignation letter, and I said, I'm going to resign by June. I gave him 6 months because it was going to be really hard to replace me, So I gave him a bunch of time to replace me, and so because I really do love him. And that's my home church. That's where I got saved at. And so I wanted them to be able to get set up. But I told them I really feel God's calling me to do something. But I didn't even really know what. And so June comes around, and then I quit the church, but I didn't know where I was going to go. So at age 25, I was at 24 at the time. I was just about to turn 25. At age 24, I stepped out in faith. And then I planted a church without any experience, with one member who was also the praise leader. His name's Steve Kim. He actually comes here now, and he's a pastor of ours. But he was like 18 or 17 at the time. And he kind of knew like 6 or 8 chords, so he was the praise leader. And literally, we started one week we had service where he led praise and I was in the church, and then we switched and I gave the message and he was in the church. And so only one time that happened. But, so here we are. We don't know what we're doing, but we stepped out in faith. In 2012, that church that we had planted stepped off in faith to join Hannah Church. You see what I did there? Stepped off. That's pretty, it's like good, right? We joined Hannah Church, and now we stepped out in faith to do that. And look how that turned out. You're tempted to scoff, right? I heard a couple of you scoff. Yes. But really look how that turned out. We met and we fell in love with Pastor Steve Oak. We met a brand new family and we started to love them. And so look, that is amazing work of faith that God did as we stepped out to join Hannah Church. And then in 2013, we all together stepped out in faith to begin this church. And look how that turned out. I don't know how it turned out. It's in the beginning. But I trust that God has something really incredible in mind as we step out in faith. And my life has been filled with these kind of things, and I like to think of myself as a faithful person, not to be like self-pat, but I really listen to God, and when God says something, I want to do it. And faith is like that. If God ever prompts you to do something, if you're filled with faith, then you'll act upon that thing. You see, faith is being convinced of unseen realities. I think God is true and real. I think His Word is true and real, even though I can't see it. And I don't see God, and I don't hear God in an audible voice speaking to me, and I don't watch any miracles. No angels have ever showed up. But I have faith. I am convinced of an unseen reality. Faith is, and this is my definition, as I studied for a long time to years ago, try to figure out what faith meant, because sometimes it seems so nebulous, doesn't it? Sometimes it seems like faith is like this, almost like a Dragon Ball characteristic where you power up in it and you have more of it or less of it. And so it seems so intangible to me. And so I started to search the Scripture and say, okay, what does faith really mean? And I sort of come up to it like this. Faith is believing something is what it says it is, or in the case of God, He is who He says He is. and he'll do what he says he'll do. And so like this chair, by its very nature, claims that it could be sat upon, right? And so by its nature, it's claiming a particular claim that you could sit on it. And I can either exercise faith, I can think that that's true, and then actually sit on it. Oh, good, it held me. And so now my faith is confirmed. You see, that's how faith works. God says, I am God, I have done some things, and then here are some promises that if you'll try out, you can confirm your faith or not. And when we think about God, it is really understanding that he is who he says he is. He'll do what he says he'll do, and then acting upon it. It's not enough to say, well, yeah, I think that'll hold me, but I'm not going to sit on that chair. Like, yeah, sure, I think it, but you don't really think it'll hold you unless you act upon it, and then you sit upon that chair. And that's then your faith in action. And so then we can grow in faith, because the more you learn about God then, the more you can trust him. The more times I sit on this chair and it holds me, the more likely I am to just plop down on it. Like you have a favorite chair at home that you don't even test it anymore. You just fall, and you fall down expecting that it will hold you because you've had experience, or you've had multiple times where this chair has held you. And so as you grow, as you understand God more, and as you walk with God longer and experience him longer, your faith actually increases. We're going to see today that faith exercise, even when what is being waited for doesn't come to fruition in the lifetime of the one exhibiting that faith. Faith is the trust that God enables a believer to press on steadfastly no matter the future that's in store for them. In today's passage, we're going to see all these great people highlighted in regards to how their faith motivated them and led them forward no matter their circumstances. But I want you to keep something in mind. These people that we look at, we're going to call them greats of the faith, but they are horribly flawed. There are things about them that are horrible and sinful and mistake-ridden. And so don't think of them like these people of faith are something that's untouchable. They are incredibly flawed human beings who exhibit faith or trust in God. So we're going to see them today, how no matter the circumstances they faced, that they move forward. Watch as their faith prompts them to lunacy. When faith and God are involved, it always looks crazy from the outside. So when you act in faith, that's going to look really crazy to people. And we're going to see it for them, and I'm going to tell you ahead of time it's true for you. If you start to act in faith, people that are on the outside looking in are going to say, that person, you're crazy. The world will offer this caption. So you know those little captions in cartoons? The caption will say, that person's just crazy. Faith says, yes, and I'm going to do it anyway. It's going to look crazy from the outside if you step out in faith. Let's check out how it worked out in Hebrews here. Here's the definition, which I began with, but here's it in Hebrews chapter 11 and 1. Now, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we haven't even seen. This is what the ancients were commended for. God say, good job. So faith is confidence. This idea of confidence is like a substructure or an underpinning, or that which stands under. So our faith, like it sits on this, like we totally trust it's the secure like underpinnings or foundation of what we believe in. So our faith is confidence, what we're hoping for, even though you didn't see it. It's assurance of what we don't see. Look, there are realities that are known in the material world, and there are realities that are in the non-material world. See, all the material world realities, they're testable by our senses. So if you wanted to see if that chair was real, you could touch it, you could push on it, you could exert force upon it, you could check out the materials, you could know the molecular structure of the chair, you could check out the design to see if by physics that thing is a strong design. You could see the quality of the metals, you could taste it, I guess, if you want. I don't know what chairs taste like, but you could explore this thing with your senses. So the realities of the things around us are explorable with our senses. But the realities that are non-physical are not explored with our senses. They're explored with our faith and our spirits. But that doesn't make them nonetheless realities, you see. So even though I can't explore God with my senses like I can the chair is explorable by senses because it's the material world. God is explorable by faith in the immaterial world. And they're both equally real, even though one isn't seen or not seen. Just like dreams are real, but there's no physicality to dreams. Okay, so he says faith is confidence in what we can't even see. By faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what is visible. So our senses experience and test the world, but our faith experiences and tests the spiritual world. Now, this is really cool because, believe it or not, this is one of the proofs for the existence of God. It's called the Kalam cosmological argument that says, like, God, all the things that are visible, they actually have to come into creation. So things don't come into creation out of nothing. Nothing is made out of nothing. And so that argument says, like, because physical things are here, they came into being, that means somebody had to bring them into being. And that argument, that philosophical argument goes on to say that God is the one who brought them into being. He's the uncaused cause for things. But so even the author of Hebrews 2,000 years ago was recognizing that this universe isn't created. It was created of something, matter that didn't exist ahead of time, out of nothing. And so now he's sort of set it up. So here's what we're talking about. Faith in things that you can't see, but you trust that they're real and that you're going to put your confidence in that. And so we're going to jump into our list. By faith, Enoch was taken from this life so that he didn't experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away. For before he was taken away, he was commended as one who pleased God. And without faith, it is impossible to please God because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and he rewards those who earnestly seek him. The Old Testament never says that Enoch had faith. What it said is that Enoch he walked with God and he pleased God. And the author of Hebrews says, well, look, if he pleased God, that means he had to have faith, because without faith, you can't please God. It's impossible to please God without faith. Not only do you have to think that he exists, but check out that statement. It is not good enough to simply think God exists and then you're exhibiting faith. Rather, you've got to think that he exists and you have to think that he cares. You see that? That he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. Because demons believe the first statement. Demons think that God exists. The devil is certainly convinced of the reality of God, but he does not think that God cares or somehow will help. And so this faith is the idea that, yes, I think God exists, but I also think God has something in mind for human beings, that he cares about what is going on. And so that's Enoch. The next guy is Noah. Now, I have a picture for Noah. He's coming out in theaters in just a couple of weeks here. Now, I didn't have a picture for Enoch because who the heck knows what that guy looks like. He's not even, like, famous, you know. But this is clearly what Noah looked like. He's a very buff Noah. Well, he did build a very big ark, right? Okay. And so by faith, Noah, when he warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear, built an ark to save his family. By his faith, he condemned the world and became heir of righteousness that is keeping with faith. So you got to imagine this guy. God says, hey, Noah, I want you to build a boat. And Noah doesn't live by the water. There's no jetty. There's no ocean near him. And so he's like, build a boat? Okay. So he goes into his backyard and he starts to build a boat on dry land. How the hell are you going to get that boat into the water, Noah? His friends got to be thinking. Now, this is insane. Is this not lunacy where God says, go out and build a boat? And this boat is like an acre big. An acre is like bigger than a football field. That's how big Noah's boat is. And he starts to build it by hand, him and his sons. Maybe they hired some people. We'll see in the movie what happens, you know, because I don't know. But he's building, and this boat takes him some time to build, maybe at least 20 years, maybe 75 years. That's the time frame he has. So between 100 years is the maximum. His kids were born when he was 500, and the boat came when he was 600. I mean, the water came when he was 600. So some time frame within there. Probably his kids were about 30 when he began. Just a guess anyway. So about 70 years, Noah starts to build this boat. Now, his friends on the outside got to be looking at him like, look, I understand boats. Boats existed. Why are you building a boat on dry land? Like, we don't live near the ocean. That's like I start to build even out here would make sense. Maybe someone could get a trailer, but they didn't have trailers. They didn't have semis to move this thing. It's not a mobile boat. It's like a boat that's big and square and huge and like bigger than a football field, and he's building it for like 50 years. Not like instantaneously. This guy's toiling day and night, spending all his resources, everything he has to build this thing. But Noah believed God. Do you see that? In holy fear, he built an ark. Noah believed God, and he acted upon it. And it was crazy talk from the outside. It was crazy all up until the moment that water came. The moment the water came and the promise was fulfilled, it became not crazy anymore. It became like, oh, he was right. And I'll tell you that's true in life. It's always crazy when you step out in faith until that thing that you step out in faith for comes to pass. And then people are like, oh, so awesome. In holy fear, he obeyed God. And I would say if he obeyed God, then so should we. Whether God calls you to build something or whatever God calls you to do. The next guy is Abraham. By faith, here's Abraham. He's a very good-looking European man. He's handsome, Abraham. I've never seen him looking that good. Anyway, by faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as an inheritance, he obeyed and he went, even though he didn't know where he was going. By faith, he made his home in the promised land, like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob. Oh, I see, I have a picture of Isaac and Jacob. Now, they look the same because I can never remember, like, which one's which. Like, one's the dad and one's the son, but, like, you can never remember, right? Isaac, Jacob. Like, same guy, right? In your brain. Like, I don't know if you're like me. I'm always like, yeah, Abraham's son. Isaac, Jacob, Isaac, Jacob. Israel. Isaac, Jacob, Israel. Enoch. Oh, crap, I don't know. Yeah, another handsome Jewish man there. And so, anyway, by faith, Abraham lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were the heirs of the same promise, even though they didn't receive it. And he was looking forward to a city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. Now, we're going to see in a minute that we're not just talking about a building. Their focus was not on the things that were going on, but the promise of God. And by faith, even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, she was 90, sort of menopause is already hit by then, can't have any kids. But she was enabled to bear children because she considered him, God, faithful, who had made the promise. And so from this one man, and he was as good as dead, because Abraham was 100, came descendants as numerous as the stars of the sky and as countless as the sand on the sea. And so we look at Abraham and we see that when he was called, he obeys. God says, I want you to leave your people. And he says, okay. Now, God doesn't tell him where he's going. Abraham just says, okay. Can you imagine trying to tell your friends, hey, friends, I think God called me. Like, think about it right now. I think God called me to go on missions. Oh, yeah? Where are you going? Well, I don't really know, but I'm selling my house. I packed up my stuff. My wife and I, we took them out of school. And then you get out of, you're there, and then they're like, what are you doing? That's crazy. Even Christians would call you crazy. They would say, that's dumb. What you need to do is get your missionary support in line. You need to have churches behind you. You need to know where you're going, what the population is like, what you're going to do when you get there. Because the way that we think faith works is God will show you all of the steps ahead of time. But the way that it works in the Bible, God doesn't. He asks you to do something, you do that, then he shows you the next step. But this seems ridiculous to us, but I'll tell you, our way is ridiculous. If you are waiting for God to show you all the steps, how this will work out perfectly, before you step out in faith, then you've got the wrong God. And you're never going to step out in faith. You're never going to. If you think that it's going to be all laid out, and then you say, okay, God, I see the plan. I'm going to agree with your plan, and now I'll step out. God don't work that way. He says, are you going to obey when I ask you to do this thing right now? Are you going to step out even though you don't know where you're going? Are you going to say yes? And it was really cool to read this because I remember at Bethel when I said, okay, God, I'll quit, but I don't know where I'm going to go. How am I going to make any money? I didn't have any other skills. It turns out I ended up having to teach, but I didn't know any of these things. I didn't know where or what I would go, what I would do. And say, okay, I'll do one step at a time, one step at a time. And God reveals it as you go along. See, we refuse to go unless God shows us the details. But if we're doing that, we're waiting for God to do that, we are going to miss God's plan. And we see Sarah also exhibited faith that she considered God, that he would be faithful to his promise. God said, you're going to have a kid. And she says, okay. And so if God says something's going to happen, then you've got to believe that it's true. You look in his word and you search that out and say, God says, here's the promises for you, then you've got to think that those are true and then act upon them. Now the Bible here takes a minute from pausing from the hall of faith and tells us that we're not talking about worldly stuff. Check this out with me in verse 13. All these people were still living by faith when they died. They didn't receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they'd been thinking of a country that they had left, they would have the opportunity to return. Instead, they were looking for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. You see, faith prompted them to see this world as not their own. So their efforts and their hopes and their work and their faith was directed heavenward, not here. Now I want you to think for a second about your life, and this is brutal. When we look at the efforts of our lives, do they point to faith, the efforts of our life, or do they point to worldliness? When you look at what you've done in your life, and it doesn't matter if you're old or young, if you look at the work of your life, the body of work that you've produced, and maybe you're 40 having a midlife crisis like some of us, look at the body of work that you've produced, even from, if you're only 10, great, or 15, or however young our youngest are. If you're really young, fine, just look at the body of work. And does that body of work demonstrate that you're walking in faith, or does that body of work demonstrate that you're walking in worldliness? I'm not saying this to condemn anyone. Rather, I would like us to hold up a mirror to our own lives and see what have we really been doing. When you look at the way that you've been walking, are you walking in the safety of the things of this world? Are you setting your vision and your goal on the things that are around? Are you looking at your retirement plan and the steps to getting a good job and how to have a right education? Are you looking at those kind of things? Or are you looking at the things of God? How have you shaped your life? What is the body of work of your life? What does it demonstrate? Because it will always demonstrate the reality of insides. If all of the work of your life has been for the world, and like this much has been for faith, then it's something I think you need to think about. It's something that I always think about. Like I sit at home and worry about this and think about it. I think about, like, God, like, what is my life? Have I spent it well for you? I mean, I'm 3/4 done or whatever, like, I'm almost at the end here. Man, I'm not midlife crisis. I'm 3/4 life crisis, right? You die at 60, right? I'm 40. Like, I'm nearly there, So some of you that are 60, like, you got, like, minutes left. What you going to do today? But you look at your life and I'm constantly examining mine to say, God, is my life a life of faith? Or does my life just look like everybody else who doesn't even know you? Am I just like every other schlep in the office, or am I different? As you look at my life's work, God, what does it demonstrate faith, or does it demonstrate not faith? Does it demonstrate I'm just living for myself, and my eyes are on this world, not on your world? You'll be able to see clearly. And this isn't a condemnation for you. I'm not trying to say, like, oh, you bad people if you're not doing this, but I'm trying to hold up the Bible as a mirror to you so that you can say, man, I don't live as a stranger here. I'm making this place, it seems like it's my home. All my investments are here. All my time is here. All my priorities are here, not on heavenly things. And I want to encourage you to just pause for a second and think about that, not because I'm condemning or mad, but because I love you. And can you imagine you end your days, however long they are, and your body of work is this much for the world, and your body of work of faith is like this? Then you go into heaven and you say, God, I got this for you. Rather than the opposite, that was for the world, but I got this for you, God. I mean, where do you want to stand before God? Faith prompted them to see this world as not their own. I don't belong here. And so I'm going to put my effort towards a heavenly effort, not towards an earthly effort. Now we're going to flip back to Abraham. This time he's going to be tested by God. There he is again. By faith, Abraham, when God tested him, he offered his son Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had embraced the promises was about to sacrifice his one and only son, even though God had told him, it's through your son Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. But Abraham, he reasoned that God could even raise the dead, so in a manner of speaking, he did receive Isaac back from the dead. So you gotta understand that God had told Abraham, I promise that through Isaac you'll have kids. And so Abraham says, okay, I believe you, God. And then God says, kill your son Isaac. Okay, well, I believe you that you're going to bring kids through him. I don't know what this means, so even though it sounds crazy, I'm going to act on it. And so he goes to take his son, and he takes his knife, and he says, I don't know what's going to happen. But I know God promised through this kid, Isaac, right here. I'm not going to have a second kid and rename him. It's not like a cheat like that. He knows it's like this Isaac. He says, I know that through this Isaac, right here that's laying down, and by the way, the kid Isaac is probably a teenager, 17 years old. He's young enough to be in the military, so it's not like a little baby boy that the dad tied up. Isaac had to exhibit some faith too. We don't ever mention that, but he lays down. His dad's like, okay, lay still, son. I don't know how it's going to happen, but I trust God's promise through Isaac. I'm going to have kids. There he is, about to kill him. He reasons, like, even if I stab him, it won't really kill him. Or, like, even if he dies, like, he'll be raised to life from God. Or maybe it'll just bounce off him. Like, he doesn't know what's going to happen. But he knows that God promised through this kid laying here of yours, this child of yours, right, this Isaac kid, that there's going to be lots of offspring. So he can't actually be dead. He doesn't know how it's going to work at all. He has no clue how he's going to retire. He has no clue what's going to happen in the future. But he trusts God's promise even when it seems crazy. Then we have Moses followed here. Even when he was a baby, by faith Moses' parents hid him. Oh, there he is. That's really cute. Okay, but it's important. By faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born because they saw that he wasn't no ordinary child. Did you see that? So they were afraid of the child? No, they were not afraid of the king's edict. That was no ordinary child. That's an actual picture of Moses in the basket. Oh, my goodness. Now, when it says not ordinary, this actually in Greek means that Moses was like extremely beautiful. Like, it does. I'm not even making that up. That's real. That's like actual Bible part. Now, the NIV is translated extraordinary, but it was like, oh my gosh, something is like recognizably differently beautiful about this kid. So clearly I have represented it well in pictorial form. Okay? And so, okay, get off of that, please. So, thank you. So, by faith, his parents hid him, even though the edict from the king says that they need to kill their son. And so they disobey the government. They're more afraid of God than they are the king's edict. And I would say that if push came to shove, even, I'm not calling for civil disobedience, fight the power, or anything like that, but what I'm saying is that we should follow God over even if the government tells us to do something. See, we should follow God always. And faith is, I'm going to trust you, God, even more than I trust what the government tells me to do. By faith, when Moses grew up, there he is, he grew up. That's like my backyard. I shaved this morning. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of the Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than all the treasures of Egypt because he was looking ahead to his reward. By faith, he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible. By faith, he kept the Passover and the application of blood so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn Israel. You see, he chose God. Moses chose God over the fleeting pleasures of sin. Then so should we. You see, he said, look, I could have all this stuff, or I could have God. And he's marked as a great man because he said, I'm going to have God. And you can be marked as a great individual because you are in Orange County, the mecca of materialism. It doesn't, like Silicon Valley, San Francisco, New York, possibly Tokyo in the world, richest places you could live. You are in the mecca here, and you have all this opportunity to either have these possessions or not. And you can decide how you're going to live. You can decide to say, look, the opportunity is available for you to have a lot of money and a lot of security, so much so that you don't ever have to rely on God for your retirement. You don't have to worry about if God's going to take care of you. You have the opportunity to make enough of that kind of money all on your own without Him. But you have the opportunity to say, I'm going to either do these pleasures here, you can live the life, the corporate life, have all sorts of stuff around you, or you can live the God life. And he persevered because he knew who God was. He said, you know what? Even when difficult things come, I'm going to do this. And that seems crazy. Moses had the opportunity to live as like the nephew of the king. He had the opportunity to live in splendor, to live in the palace, to have all the food he wants, to have all the girls he wants, to have any entertainment he wants. His entertainment budget is Bieber-like, whatever, like he's got plenty of budget. And he says, I'm going to do that, or am I going to go live with the slaves? They're not even free people. Am I going to be with the slaves? Am I going to be with these people who are whipped and nothing, and they didn't even have their own country? Am I going to be disrespected and disgraced, or am I going to live this? I mean, he has a really real choice. But I would say you guys got a real choice in Orange County. We have a real choice. What are you going to do? Live for this or live for this? And from the outside, when Moses picked this, can you imagine how crazy he looked? Which of his rich friends were like, that is a really good idea, bro? Man, you totally nailed it right there. None of his friends were saying that. His adoptive parents weren't saying that. They were like, hey, that's the wrong choice. Hey, that's the wrong choice. And so how crazy did that look on the outside? And then it mentions the Passover. How crazy. God says, splash blood on your door, and then I won't kill your baby. What? I mean, that's crazy. That didn't even make sense. I don't even know what that means, but I'll do it. Like, what do you mean, kill an animal, take its blood, and who wants blood on their house? I don't want blood on my door frame. And by faith, they say, God, I'm going to trust that you know what's better. I have no idea what's going on, and I'm going to kill an animal. I'm going to put blood on the door. And that seems crazy to me. But I'm going to exercise faith. I'm going to trust, God, that you know what you're doing, and that things you say are real and true and right, even if it doesn't make sense, even if it seems like lunacy. And the last person here that we're going to detail, her name is Rahab. She's a prostitute. Oh, hey. Dang. Don't stumble. Please no one sin. She is a prostitute. Hey, girl. So she's from around the way, Okay, the Bible part now. But so I should have put a disclaimer. This may cause permanent damage. By viewing this slide. By faith, the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. This is back in the time of Joshua, Jericho. The walls fell down. All the walls except hers where she was living. And it says, by faith, this prostitute Rahab welcomed spies, believed that God is who he says he is, and then demonstrated it by going against her government. She went against her people. She went against her culture. And so should we. And I want you to think, next time you think that you're unworthy, imagine a woman of her background being on this list. Not even being on the list. She's the anchor. It's like that's the fastest person. A woman of her status, of her background. She's not, this word prostitute, she's not even a shrine prostitute. Sometimes they had prostitutes that worked in the temple for pagan religions, and they were actually respected because they were doing God's work sort of in this twisted way. But she's not a shrine prostitute. She's a hooker. She's a beach boulevard hooker. Missing teeth, whatever, you think of as hooker. Now, I did those pictures because I was really dumb, and I started to Google, because I put my face on all the others. I Googled prostitute images, and then I was like, oh, man, can't do that. And I wasn't even thinking, so I had to reenact it instead. But she's literally she's just a hooker. You think you've made bad choices? Most of you, almost all of you aren't hookers. You think that, just in case, hookers are people too, oh, that sounds really bad. I almost said I love hookers, but I love hookers. I want to admit to you, church, I love hookers. And if you're a hooker, I love you and God loves you. And she anchors this list. Because it's not about what you have done. It's not about the mistakes you made. I told you every one of these people is flatally, she's a hooker. And she still can demonstrate faith that falls in this great hall of faith in the Bible. The Holy Bible. She's in it. She's in it in the Old Testament and she's in it in the New. Most people, sometimes they get one or the other. She got both. She's in the hall of faith. And she was a hooker. Despite her mistakes, she still can be faithful. So next time you think that you're unworthy, think about these people. And they are fatally flawed. They are human beings, and yet they exhibit faith. Check this out. All the more, and what more should I say? I don't have time to talk about Gideon or Barak or Samson. Those guys are messed up dudes. Samson's like going with Philistine chicks and like gets his eyes gouged out and kills himself, like, and kills other people with him. Not a great person. And Japheth and David has sex with another guy's wife and kills him because she got pregnant and he didn't want anyone to find out. Awesome. I didn't kill anybody. I didn't have sex with anyone's wife, and I didn't get anyone other than my own wife pregnant. And so I'm better than that guy. Y'all better than that guy. And Samuel and the prophets, and these people, they had faith. They were able to conquer kingdoms and administer justice and gain what is promised. They shut the mouths of lions and quenched the fury of flames. They escaped the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned to strength, and they became powerful in battle, and they routed their foreign armies, and women received back their dead, and they're raised to life. So all these crazy, even good things can happen when you walk out in faith. But look, it's not just about good things. Check out the back half of the list. There were others who were tortured, refusing to be released so that they might gain an even better resurrection. Some faced jeers and flogging and chains and imprisonment, and they were put to death by stoning, and some people were sawed in two, and they were killed by the sword, and they went out in sheepskin and goatskin, destitute, persecuted, and mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. They wandered in deserts and mountains, living in caves and in holes and in the ground. See, some were raised to life, some were raised from the dead, and some were brought to death. But they didn't care. Don't you see, all of this was, they don't care what happens. It doesn't matter if this great thing happens or if I get killed or if I get chained, because none of this stuff on this planet matters. What matters is God. The eternal reality outweighs the current or the physical reality. And they live their lives that way. And that is why they are commended for faith, because they don't care about the things that are going on. Do they make mistakes? Yes. Are they flawed humans? Yes. Are they horrible? Sometimes they're even horrible. But they still say, God, I screwed this up and I'm following you though. Oh man, I messed this up, but I still want to keep following you. And their reality is heavenward. Their reality is not in the physical. These were all commended for their faith. This next verse here in 39. Yet none of them received what had been promised, since God had planned something better for us, so that only together with us would they be made perfect. So they didn't receive all these blessings. That even the eternal things weren't received until Christ. And Jesus Christ died on the cross, and they received this eternal blessing finally, the one that we share in also. You see, the underlying fact for all these people is that their hope was heaven, not here. And so they lived lives with this truth and this reality in mind. They faced untold persecution, and their faith held them fast as they stepped out to follow God no matter the cost. You see, in every situation we saw here, whether it's Noah building a boat or a prostitute flipping against her people and following God, every single one of these people, their faith prompted lunacy. In our modern era, as we sit here today, faith prompts a mild blip on the inner soul meter, but nothing like our predecessors. See, when we talk and think about faith, you talk about and think about maybe attending church a little bit more regularly. But it's not something that's crazy. See, our faith just prompts, maybe act a little better. But that's not what the Bible teaches. The Bible teaches, if you think God is real and these are his words, and you act on them, something crazy is going to happen. Maybe you have faith, you start to follow the Bible, and it gets nutty. Well, I'll tell you what, maybe you don't divorce your wife, even if you fall out of love with her. That's crazy that you don't divorce your wife. It's crazy that you have sex with only one person. 97% of people have sex with someone that's not their wife. 97% of people have sex before they get married. And if you decided not to, how crazy would that be? If you decided that you aren't going to watch pornography, how crazy would that be? People would think you're crazy. What if you decided to love your enemy, your actual enemies? Let's say that instead of being glad when bin Laden was killed? What if you were sad because you prayed for him and you loved him? And you were praying that he would get saved instead. Wouldn't that have been a better miracle than killing him? Now, I know that we have law enforcement and military people, friends that we love, and loving someone doesn't mean that you allow them to do whatever you want. And so because I love someone, perhaps I do restrain them. Perhaps I keep them from killing people or hurting people. That may be true. So I'm not saying that the military or the police aren't okay. But do we love our enemies, or like our actual enemies? And if you started to, wouldn't people think you're crazy? If you started to want to go to Afghanistan, even if they're going to behead you and share the love of Christ, how crazy is that? I mean, that's not real, right? Like, none of us are going to really do that. Well, it's not real because then our faith isn't real. Why is none of us going to do that? Why can't we do those things? Wouldn't it be crazy if you start to share the gospel with those that are around you? I mean, they might make fun of you at work. You might lose a friend or two. Oh my gosh, you might get fired from your job if you evangelize at the workplace. You might. Wouldn't that be crazy, though, if you did it? What if you became open to the possibility of selling everything that you own and going out to another country to share the gospel? What do you think? Who do you think does this? Do you think it's like spiritual giants? Do spiritual giants become pastors? No, regular people who say, you know what, God, I trust you, and I'm going to step out in this. Can you imagine if you told your mother-in-law right now, like, oh yeah, we sold our house, they took the kids out of school, we're moving to Afghanistan, and we're going to share the gospel. We're not going to fake it like, well, we're oil drilling. We're actually just going to share the gospel, and if they kill us, they kill us. Whatever. Can you imagine? What would all your friends say? You're crazy. What if you started investing money in God's kingdom instead of saving up more in your 401k or your retirement package? What if you started to do that? What would your friends say? Say, that's so crazy. They say, you're crazy. But faith always precedes lunacy. It will always look crazy from the outside. What if you were going to do something super crazy like spend less time at work and more time with your family? What if you cared more about the people that are close to you than you do strangers or your job? What if you became content with what you have, not wanting more and more? What if it was okay that you weren't rich? What if it all of a sudden became okay to not get more stuff and to give to poor people and to help orphans? Well, what if no longer your life goal was to have more things? Because I would venture to guess nearly all of us, our life goal is to have more stuff. If you're in college, the only reason you're in college is so you can make more money. Almost always. For a good job. Why? To get a good home. That's all material-based stuff. What if our plan, our major, our career was centered around God instead of being centered around money or things of this world? What would happen? Well, that'd be crazy. Your mom might get mad, right? You say, Mom, I'm open to being a missionary. No, you're not. We're not open to being a missionary. Mom, I quit my job. I'm going to find out what God wants me to do. No, you get back to State Farm. Do what you're told to do. Right? Like Daniel quit a job for godly reasons, I bet. He's going to step out in faith. Well, now he has an opportunity to see. Is he going to go after a better job that he can make more money? Or is he going to have to go after what God wants him to do? He's at this super crux moment, which is really cool. Maybe he'll hear today. But he's not the only one. Every single one of us in this room are at this place where we can say, God, I'm going to follow after you, and I'm going to increase the amount of faith, like sort of thing that I have, or I'm going to follow me in the world, and I'm going to increase that kind of amount of stuff. What if you loved others deeply and you decided to drop some of your barriers? Wouldn't that be crazy if you said, oh, I've got these ugly sins, and we still loved you anyway? What if you started to care about people more than you cared about yourself? What if the realities of the Bible were your realities? What if the promises from God's Word were what yours were? And when you read it and He's telling you to do stuff and act a certain way, what if you actually did that from the outside? That's going to be crazy. You're going to fall so far behind in the Orange County rat race for more stuff. Your Korean friends are going to think like, oh, they're not successful. People are going to look down on you from the world's perspective. And they're going to say, that person's crazy. That's just dumb. But what's dumb in the world's eyes isn't always dumb in God's eyes. And what's crazy in the world's eyes is, in fact, faith in God's eyes. God's calling each of you to lunacy. He really is. He's calling you to something crazy. Asking you to meet him, asking you to trust him, asking you to follow him in faith, to be different than the things that are around. And I don't want faith to be this like just blip in our soul right now that you kind of heard about it and then you're like, cool. And I don't think that you want that. I think you came here on purpose. I think God brought you here today so that you could hear that God has something crazy in mind for you. What does God have planned for you? I don't know. I have no idea. But I promise you it's crazy if you trust him. And it won't even make any sense. But when you're in the moment, it makes sense. Like now that I'm here, like 16 years ago when I quit the church and stepped out in faith, oh man, that was so dumb. And so right. And that I gave my life to follow God as a pastor, not try to make more money. And that even my wife and I were selling our house right now, not to get richer. We actually don't want her to work. We're selling our house so that she doesn't have to work, and we're going to spend all the equity that we make so that she doesn't have to work, because we think it's important that she stays with our kids. Now, my parents think this is a stupid idea. Our real estate agent who loves us thinks it's a stupid idea because we're mortgaging our future. We're going to waste $200,000 on renting. Yes, but we're doing it so that we can invest in our children because we think that that's what God wants us to do. It looks super crazy. My dad, not a Christian, he thinks it's a bad idea. People think that it's a bad idea. Our friends think it's a bad idea. But we're trying to do what God wants. I don't care what people want. And so we're going to step out in faith and say, God, I don't know how we're going to retire. Do you know how much we have in retirement? Zero. We have zero 501k. We have zero retirement plan. We have 3 children. We're going to go for 8. Then we're assured a retirement plan. No, we're not. It's not going to happen. Unless she looks at those pictures, then maybe, huh? I have no idea what God has planned for you, but I'll tell you it's going to be amazing. But it's going to be crazy. Would you pray with me for lunacy? Would you pray with me for the faith that precedes that? Are you seriously, God? Would you join with me in asking, and I always want to ask selfishly because I think it's important that I follow God, and because I'm living my life here. But I want to follow God better. I want to do all the things he wants and none of the things that the world wants. I want my measure of faith input to be huge and my measure of worldly input to be small. Really, what does this world have to offer you? What security comes in that money? What security comes from that title? What does that major really get you? What are you doing? What are you living for? Yes, you are flawed. Yes, you have messed up your life. Great. Step out in faith then.